Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be talking to you about life transition signs, what you should feel during this process. Continuing on the topic of life changes, today I'm going to be talking to you about what are the signs you should be looking out for when you're ready for a life transition, and what you should feel internally and emotionally once you're ready to make a life transition. Every time we go through a change, especially a big one, we can feel it in our bodies and in our mind. For most of us, small changes doesn't really affect us much, but big ones definitely do. When we make big or massive changes in our lives, we can feel it all throughout our body and through our emotions, and sometimes it can be quite unpleasant. I'm currently going through a life transition period myself, and all the life transition signs really changed me. Things like getting comfortable with a life transition even before I'm ready to actually do it, and how I felt during this process and how I was able to manage it through it. We are often ready to transition first before we actually make that decision to do so. So here are some of the signs that you might be ready for a life transition change. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my life transition signs, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And let's go. So you're probably thinking, when we go through a life change, isn't it obvious or simple to notice? Well, yes and no. Big life changes do come suddenly and you notice it right away. But what's harder to tell is that in-between period where you're doing nothing and making a life change. This is your life transition period. And in this transition period, you're getting ready to make that life transition move, but you haven't made it yet. This phase doesn't have a set period of time. It can be however long it takes you to make that big decision. And it can be identified as a sort of malaise in your life, that you know you need to change something, but you don't know how to do it yet. And you might have buried feelings about needing to make a move, but you don't know how to do it or execute on it, so you just wait and think about it. Life transition periods can be very independent of big changes in your life. We are often ready to transition first before we do the big action in our lives. Because the fact of the matter is, it is really hard to make a big life change without preparing your mind and body for it first. You unconsciously know that you need to change, and therefore you go ahead with the change. We don't do it willy-nilly. For me, I needed to change for a while, and I refused to see the signs or even acknowledge that something needed to be changed. The long-term signs were very gradual, and I hardly noticed them from day to day. But the roots of my life transition was planted well before the pandemic even started. And it took me years before I was fully able to and finally execute on my big life changes. Generally, I was in a groove and I was kind of stuck in my situation at the time. And it wasn't like it was completely bad, but it was just hard to take myself out of it without doing a lot of work that I wasn't prepared to do yet. Things like really asking hard questions in my life and where I want to take it and different directions for my career. And during this time, I also wasn't very active with my life. During the pandemic, I really didn't have any direction or was proactive about things. I didn't have near-term goals to keep my mind focused on something. And lastly, as I grew into my mid-30s, I just wanted different things and I was ready for something to change within my life. Sometimes age could be a determinant factor in whether or not you're ready for a life change. So here are some of my life transition stages that might help you if you're going through the same thing. So here are some of my life transition signs. Number 1, waiting for something to happen. Sometimes in life, there are periods in which you're just waiting for something to happen within your life. This can be like waiting for school to finish or finally getting into a relationship after dating a while, or even waiting on that promotion that you've been trying to get for the last couple of years. It's a period that we're waiting for something big to happen that's just around the corner from now. This might not be very obvious for some people, but sometimes when you're waiting for something, you are on the verge of a life transition. This is because once we finish that one thing or we're waiting on something to happen, our life might change because of it. Regardless of whether or not it actually happens, your mind is waiting and it's prepared for a future adjustment in your life. You are basically ready for that change, but it just hasn't happened yet due to external circumstances. I enter these waiting periods a lot for my long-term goals in life. I prepare for it, I plan it, and I just wait until something happens. And because I prepared for it, my mind, body, and emotions are ready to go whenever that life change happens. So these waiting periods are often the easiest to adjust to once that life transition actually happens to you. So if you feel like you're waiting, especially on a long-term goal, you may be ready for a transition. Number 2, comfort turns to boredom. One of the bigger signs for me as I go through a life transition is whether or not I'm comfortable and I'm on the verge of boredom. And there's a very clear distinction between being comfortable in your situation and being bored of your current situation. One is keeping things exactly the same and the other is altering your lifestyle dramatically. This is because as soon as we hit boredom, we might be looking for a way out or a way to do something different. And we might want to change our life circumstances to follow that new novel path. I felt this way many times in my life where I was clearly bored and wanted a break from it all. And usually I wasn't feeling good about a situation because I was in a rut. Maybe a job was too easy or the situation wasn't ideal for me to stay in long term. When you feel the need to move on, you'll have cues that you'll indicate to other people that you're ready to go, and that you're ready for a new environment and new experiences and possibly new people as well. These can be in the form of hasty decisions, easy to anger, and not paying attention to the details. And all are signs that something is not going right within your life. So watch out when comfort turns into boredom. You might be ready for a life transition. Number 3, changing mindsets. Sometimes due to age or circumstances in our life, we're ready for a life transition. Obvious markers are age milestones and maturity milestones. As we age, we gradually want different things in our lives. What we want in our 20s might not be what we want in our 30s or 40s. This can pertain to dating, social life, and a career. Every 5 years feels like an important milestone for me to mix up my life with something new. As I start to get closer to numbers divisible by 5, I started to experience more life transition signs. My mindset adapts to the new age and I start to recalibrate the things that I want in my life, and also what I need to do in the next couple of years to sustain my growth and development. A mindset change doesn't have to be necessarily age specific, it just needs to pertain to you changing your mindset on something. You might start to notice a shift in your thinking and you might want to feel different things in your life now. We all change with time, and knowing what leads up to a change in our mindset can indicate whether or not we're going through a life transition. And number 4, massive external reset. Sometimes a huge change outside of our normal circumstances can affect whether or not we enter a life transition stage. And depending on what kind of change it is, it can shift our perspective and force us into a life transition. These examples for me were the Great Recession of 08 and 09 and the pandemic. But for others, it could be a natural disaster or a loss of a family member. During an external reset, it forces us to change what our normal looks like. And we have to grapple with it and respond to it in real time. We might not have a lot of time to process it. Depending on how large the change is, you won't be the same person going into it as you will on the other side of it. For me, the events in my life changed me irrevocably. I am not the same person I was on the other side of it. And both the recession and the pandemic has changed my future outlook as well. But my life changes were definitely different depending on the event. For example, during the Great Depression, my career prospects tanked greatly. And it ultimately changed the direction of my life because I wasn't able to find a job when I graduated. I had to go back to get my master's degree, to try to wait it out. And I wasn't necessarily prepared to get the master's degree at that time. I was thrust into it. And ultimately, during the process of getting my master's degree, I lost a year due to the application process and deadline. Also, transitioning from school to a gap year and back to a school was hard for me. And the pandemic really forced me to look at my work-life balance and whether or not I was actually gaining fulfillment from it. Coming out of the pandemic, I'm much more able to balance my work and life priorities. Although it's never guaranteed, external circumstances can have an impact on your life, good or bad, and can help you through a transition. And during these periods, we must be able to navigate our thoughts and feelings through these difficult transition periods. For me, big events were always a sign for me to start changing things up in my life and move on to the new normal. So here are my general thoughts on life transitions. As we go through life transitions, the thing I struggle with the most is keeping sane through the process of life transition. It's certainly been up and down for me during this transition phase where I need to process what's going on around me, and the struggle from needing a life change to actually taking action on going through a life change. You set in motion a chain of events that will ultimately change your life. That means you need to make sure that the actions you take are really what you want and you don't have any regrets from it. Or if you do have regrets, they're very small and minor. I've certainly had periods of doubt during my current life transition period, but I was comforted by the fact of a CNBC article that I saw. It pointed to a scientific article that showed that those who made a change proactively were happier as a result of it, and those who didn't change didn't experience any happiness boost in the future. So maybe in life, the right decision is always to make that proactive life change. I'll put a link down in the description box below for that CNBC article. So those were my personal life transition signs. Each time I've gone through a life transition period, I've gone through a majority of these signs. And sometimes these signs can manifest over a period of several years in my life. The build-up to changing your life and taking action on it is not instant in most cases. For people to choose to change, they have to be in the right mindset, and the right opportunity might have to come along before they'll make that decision. And depending on your personality, it may take you even years to warm up the idea of changing or doing something different. And in other cases, an age milestone or an external event might force you to go through a life transition period much sooner, forcing us into changes that we might not be prepared for or know what to do. So I hope my experience can benefit those who are thinking about a life transition or are going through the transition period themselves currently. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on what do you notice when you're going through a life change, and has it been a good experience for you or not? And I'll see you next time.